Hey everyone, this is Derek Bros with the Conscious Resistance Network, and this is the Finders and Investigation number 3. Before we get into it, I want to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com, where you can find all of our latest content, new content from Regan Kelly, from our Danilo Peaceful Anarchism. You can see our last investigation and lots more articles. I want to just invite you to bookmark that. Also sign up for our newsletter right here, where I send out a weekly newsletter update for everybody who wants to stay up to date with our work. And if you would like to support us in our efforts to make these documentaries, please consider signing up for as little as $1 a month for my Patreon account. All this money is going to fund the documentaries we're making, including the upcoming Finders documentary. Now, before I get into this, I want to invite you guys to watch an investigation number 1 if you haven't done so, and an investigation number 2, because number 1 introduces the story and gives a breakdown. Number 2 gets a little bit further and talks about some of the other pieces of the puzzle here. And today we're going to be expanding on that. So go check those out if you have not yet, and let's get into it. Today in our investigation, you can see here, this is an ongoing folder with all of my files, including right here the script, the Finder's script, which is nearly done, and I've finally written the script, and we've realized it's going to end up being a 2-part documentary, because this documentary and all the information I have is probably going to be about an hour long. So I have finished part 1 of the script. I'll be recording that today, and then we'll start editing ASAP. And you guys who are following my actual investigation, though, are going to get some of the details ahead. Of course, I promise I'm saving the best for the actual documentary. So today we're going to focus on Marion Petty. And Marion Petty is the founder of the Finders. And this is a very mysterious person with not a lot of details on, who they were as an individual. Like, what they were like. Were they a kind person? Did they like to joke around? Were they, anything like that? It's very scarce, and the information is very, very sparse on who this person is. But we do have a few different interesting details that point to Marion Petty, the founder of the Finders, being deeply connected to intelligence agencies. So let's just start at the beginning. Marion Petty was born in 1921, and he's passed away in the early 2000s. Now I'm going to read you some of the quotes from different articles that I found that kind of describe who Petty was a little bit. Petty, a retired Air Force Master Sergeant whose location is not known, was identified by associates and has published reports as the Finders group leader. That's from the Associated Press. Officials say the Finders apparently is a remnant of a 1960s counterculture movement created by Marion Petty, a charismatic leader who urged his followers to study a doctrine that stressed self-exploration and futurism. Petty described the Finders as a communal, holistic living and learning arrangement. The group numbers some 20 members, Petty says. They do freelance journalism, research, and competitor intelligence for a variety of mostly foreign clients. The Finders claim they work for no foreign governments, from the U.S. News and World Report. This is from the Associated Press. Priscilla Coates of San Jose, California, former national director of the Chicago-based Cult Awareness Network, and now president of the Bay Area chapter, said the Finders is, quote, not a satanic group. It's not a religious, therapy, or political, quote. It's just a weird situation where Petty controlled others and made everything a game. Now, interestingly, though, I found a Culpeper, Virginia lawyer named John J. Davies, who represented a former Finders member in a divorce case, because as you'll find out in this, there was a divorce within the group, and it turned into a lawsuit, so certain members left, and it caused a rift in the group, let's just say that. So this lawyer, though, who was representing the divorcee, says that Finders members sent him letters, quote, very profane in terms of sexual connotation. They were extremely creative parodies of literature designed to intimidate me. He also said that they didn't want the group member to leave, like the group, the Finders, was trying to keep them from leaving. Former followers of Marion Petty say they called him the student, the stroller, the game caller, or the pathfinder, and believed that when Petty lectured them at their Glover Park house about the New Age way of living and Eastern mysticism, he could peer into their souls almost as if he had X-ray vision. Interviews with former members and associates of the Washington-based group of 40 or so followers known as the Finders describe an organization completely dominated by the 66-year-old Petty and driven by a complex belief system confounding to outsiders. The commune evolved with the human potential movement of the 70s with a heavy emphasis on shedding inhibitions and delusions, most of whom do not want to be identified. Games played a central role inside the Finders, and it was often difficult to know when the members were playing out some fantasy and when they were not, ex-associates said. The Finders' tendency to abandon jobs and homes at a moment's notice could complicate law enforcement efforts to find the group's members. So they were known for just picking up and leaving at random moments' notice, supposedly because that was a part of the game. Says sometimes they approach a business, from a major Washington law firm to a leftist think tank, and offered their expertise in computer programming and other services. Other times the group went through the motions of setting up a business, sometimes printing up phony business cards. Some members used up to 20 aliases. Robert Terrell, who we did interview for this documentary, and you will hear him speak directly, called the Finders leader Marion Petty my entertainer. He provides me with a model of somebody who is never satisfied with the status quo, and he inspires me upward and keeps me laughing as I go. Robert Terrell told me that he shared a toothbrush with Petty for 25 years and was like his right-hand man. And, so I think we should listen to what he has to say on this. Petty, an Air Force Master Sergeant who retired in 1956, bought extensive woodland property in rural Madison County, Virginia. Started the Finders in late 1960 as a communal experiment. He sought intelligent, well-educated people who could discuss the latest thought in philosophy, psychology, and human development. So that's kind of the picture that they've painted. He's just this eccentric guy. He likes to play games, and it was like intriguing, but also confounding to a lot of people. But it does seem like there's more to this story. And now you've heard mentioned a couple times here. It says a former Air Force Master Sergeant who retired in 1956. But apparently it was more than that. He was working in Air Force intelligence, from what it seems. And now I'm going to read to you a document here, and this is, was titled Investigative Leads Memo, and you can see here in my personal notes, I need to confirm with Wendell Minnick, this is another journalist, but it was originally leaked or sent to a journalist by the name of Daniel Brandt, who was investigating the Finders, and he told me it was produced sometimes during the 1980s, authorship unknown. So he gets leaked this memo that he says it wasn't a government document necessarily. It had a cover page that just said Investigative Leads Memo. Like somebody had dug into Petty and then was sharing this information with this journalist to let him know, hey, this is who Petty really is. This is what's going on behind the scenes. So I will read this to you guys. It says, Petty met Joseph Chang, a Chinese agent operating under journalistic cover, in 1939 and remained in close contact with him throughout the war. Around this time, Petty also made connections with the OSS, and the OSS, of course, was the predecessor to the CIA, through George Varga, Earl D. Brody, and Nick von Neumann, John von Neumann's brother. And if you know who John von Neumann is, he's a scientist, researcher, and you start to see these connections, that Petty wasn't just some random person, but he was connected to a lot of people. And all these men were low-level OSS officers. Sometimes near the end of the war, Chang introduced Petty to Charles E. Marsh, again, another name that you see pop up in these sort of cultish types groups, at the National Press Club. Marsh, who ran the best private intelligence network of his era and was an intimate of FDR, Henry Wallace, and later Lyndon Johnson, became Petty's mentor and role model. So this Charles E. Marsh guy, again, there's a reason to look into him, and I will do that in the documentary, shaping his career. Marsh's mentor and role model was Colonel Edward House, who was a personal advisor to President Wilson circa 1919 and often mentioned in connection to the Council on Foreign Relations. So again, we're starting to see a web of connections here. It says that Marsh, who was Petty's his advisor, his role model, died in 1964. In 1950s and 60s, Marsh provided funds for Petty to purchase hundreds of acres of farmland in Madison and Rappahannock counties near his estate in Culpeper County. Later, Petty arranged for William Yandell Elliott of Harvard University to purchase a property adjacent to him in Madison County. Elliott was a government professor at Harvard University who was on the National Security Council's planning board and a trustee of Radio Liberty, which was sponsored by the CIA. As of 1984, Elliott was a member of Accuracy in Media and wrote numerous books. In 1946, Petty, acting as a chauffeur to General Ira Aker, and this is the thing, is they say he was a chauffeur to all these Air Force intelligence people, and that supposedly after he left the Air Force, he had nothing to do with intelligence agencies. Marsh arranged for him to be trained in counterintelligence in Baltimore, Maryland. Around this time, Petty established close ties to two guards of atom bomb secrets, Captain Michael Altier and Major Harry Wallinen, both retired. In 1954, Petty recruited Eric Heiberg, who lost his NSA clearance at about this time. Heiberg was redeployed as a private investigator and subsequently as a talent spotter in Georgetown University. Petty received intelligence training at Georgetown University in 1956 and was sent to the U.S. Air Force Intelligence Training School in Frankfurt, Germany in 1956 and 57. Through Marsh, Petty got his wife a job with the CIA from 1957 to early 61, working in Washington as a secretary and in Germany for the Chief of Station Frankfurt, Colonel Leonard Wegener, U.S. Air Force. Trained Petty and advised Petty to retire from active military service and surround himself with kooks, recruiting agents from youth hostels and universities. Major George Varga became Petty's case officer, relaying Colonel Wegener's instructions until Varga died in the 1970s. Under Varga's instructions, Petty recruited a network of agents in Europe, including Dr. Keith Arnold, who he accompanied to Moscow in 1959 or 60. Arnold, currently based in Hong Kong, has made over 40 trips to mainland China and has stayed in contact with Petty. In the 1960s, Petty established connections with the Beat movement. Norman Mailer and Dick Dabney frequented his Virginia farm. Dabney's widow, Dana, has extensive files on Petty. Peter Gillingham, Intermediate Technology, and Christopher Sonn, currently Goldman Sachs, met Petty in Moscow in 61. In the early 60s, Petty allowed Ralph Borsodi and Mildred Loomis to use his Virginia property for the School of Living, a decentralized one-world government front organization. Around 1964, Petty recruited Bosko Nedeljkovic and deployed him to penetrate the Institute for Policy Studies. In 1967 or 68, Petty established a futurist network assisting Edward S. Cornish in founding the World Future Society and working through Roy Mason and John Naisbitt. At this time, Petty also penetrated the hippie drug culture, and through retired naval intelligence officers Waite Schneider, who was Timothy Leary and Billy Hitch's private pilot, and William Polson. In 1971, Petty infiltrated the Human Potential movement, setting up Ken Casey as a prominent guru and working through Dr. Stephen Beltz, a behavior modification specialist who more recently deployed to the Institute of Cultural Affairs and the Meta Network cult. Christopher Bird, a former CIA officer who served in Japan and a psych warfare specialist in the Army and author of New Age and occult books, has also been associated with Petty. Bird wrote The Secret Life of Plants with Peter Tompkins. Tompkins wrote on New Age subjects like the pyramids and once served in the OSS. Petty's activities took a different turn in 1979 when he recruited John J. Cox, founder of General Scientific, a computer firm specializing in classified defense contracts. Cox trained several of Petty's finders in computer programming and communication technologies and took 2 or more of them to Costa Rica and Panama in 80 and 81. Cox worked through Miguel Barzuna, a prominent Costa Rican money launderer, the Vienna, Virginia-based Institute for International Development, and Cuban exile Emilio Rivera in Costa Rica and Panama. Through Cox, Petty and the finders linked up with several Washington-area computer-oriented groups, including Community Computers, a front organization for the community, a cult run by Michael Rios. Petty's son, David Petty, is a member of the community. Petty's other son, George, may be the one who was in Air America. And Air America, of course, was an airline that was a front for the CIA. So Petty says he's not connected to the Air Force intelligence, but as you can see here, he's surrounded by, his wife works for the CIA, his son worked for Air America, CIA front operation. He's connected with all these spooks. Yeah. That's basically kind of the end of it. And so, like I said, this is a memo that was leaked to somebody, and it gives pretty detailed explanation of who he was, and then the rest of it is just gleaned from what we know about the documents and what the articles reported about this guy. But I think just looking at this information alone, it's quite clear this guy was surrounded by intelligence agencies, and, well, I'll leave my final conclusions to the documentary, but needless to say, I don't buy the idea that he, left the intelligence community and never looked back and never had any connection to them again. In my eyes, it's quite clear this guy was intelligence, operating intelligence in some way, in some capacity, till the end of his life, and that the Finders was a part of that. So that's it for this episode, guys. That's the 3rd episode of the Finders investigation. I want to end this by saying this. I'm going to meet a source related to the Finders. I'm recording this on Saturday. I fly out on Sunday. You'll probably be hearing this on Monday or afterwards. And hopefully I'm home and everything is well by the time you're hearing this. But I'm going to meet a source related to the Finders. I cannot tell you where it's at, of course, for obvious reasons, but people close to me know where it's at in case anything happens. But I do think that this source that I'm meeting with, if everything goes well, will be a key part in unraveling the truth about the Finders. So wish me luck, and please subscribe, follow, like, share, all that good stuff. Consider signing up on Patreon so we can continue to do this. And, yeah, thank you guys for paying attention to my work and my efforts. I appreciate it. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.